Hey there folks, and welcome back for another video. I'm your host CDB, and today we got a subject for you. Don't sleep on vintage shave gear. Don't sleep on vintage shave gear. Let's just go ahead and start out by misting, and then I'll tell you what we're going to use as I begin to use the pre-shave. The soap today is not vintage. It is Sterling Black Cherry Glacial, and these soaps come to you at an excellent price. I didn't figure up the price today, but it's usually like $2.30 some cents an ounce, under $3 an ounce on the cost chart, which is absolutely superb. And this soap is of sufficient quality to work for almost anybody and probably everybody. It's not a fancy pants soap. It is a workman, like, I'm going to get the job done and I'm going to do it well every single time, consistently, and you don't have to spend a ton of money on it. So that's always appealing to me. The razor we're going to use today is the Gillette Toggle. I figured I'd use it once more before I send it back to David, set on 9. But I also wanted to show you just an example of a vintage razor. This one here is a Wade & Butcher. This is a medium hollow ground. Excellent, excellent, excellent razor. And the reason I'm bringing this up today is there are a lot of folks who, when they first start out, they buy modern everything, and at some point along the line, they try a vintage razor, and they think it doesn't work well. Well, what I learned, and I'm giving you my own experience. By the way, the scent on this is very stout. It's about 8 or 9. Smells like a Hall's cough drop, or like a mentholated cherry cough drop, which I don't mind at all. And it's highly mentholated, which I don't mind at all as well. Anyway, so a lot of people start out with vintage gear, or at some point, they start out with modern gear, and then they try a Fat Boy or a Gillette razor of some sort. And then they, a lot of times, come away and they go, that's not very good. It doesn't work very well for me. Listen, this happened to me. When I first started, I bought a lot of modern razors, and then I bought some vintage razors. And because they were mild, I thought they didn't work well. Well, later on, once I learned to shave better and develop better technique, I found they worked just fine. And so it was actually me. So if you try a vintage razor early on and you think it doesn't work well, hold it until later. Now, this brush here is a vintage Ever-Ready R40, between 50 and 70 years old, pure badger. And I've used this several days in a row, and I've used it for a couple of head shaves. It has not dropped a single hair. This is the original knot. One of the best brushes I've ever used, and it is soft despite being pure badger. We'll talk about that more in a little bit, because it really blows my mind how good that brush is relative to today's offerings, which I don't find to be as good. Now, let me make a caveat. I haven't bought a high-end brush natural hair brush for about 3 years probably, but as of the time I stopped, man, that feels great. Every brush I'd ever had, regardless of cost, brushes upwards of $300, would always shed and were really annoying to me. That brush right there, it's unbelievable. It's soft, it feels great, it doesn't shed, it doesn't stink. Fantastic. Vintage. And that's sort of what spurred me on, or got me to make the video today and talk about this a little bit, because I was going to use the Wade & Butcher I have down here, but I said, you know what, let's use this Toggle one more time and enjoy it. And so what happens is people try the vintage Gillette razors, most of which are mild in my opinion, even when dialed all the way up, which this one is. But a lot of times they don't know how to use them. So it's early on, and they've tried some more aggressive razors, and they think that's what's required. But let me tell you, most razors will work well for most people, not all. There are special scenarios where a particular razor may not work as well for you. But for the most part, with proper technique, that's the key caveat, technique. I saw Mike Baker speak of this in a video yesterday. With proper technique, you can make most things work and work effectively. When you're new, just assume you don't have good technique. It takes months, if not at least a year, to really develop solid technique and get to know what your face can tolerate, and how things go. Now, you can be a very good shaver within a couple of months, but it really doesn't all start to click until later, in my view. By the way, this soap, getting some good menthol out of it, which is fantastic. Great performer, great cost. And this brush really blows my mind. I don't recall ever being so surprised by a brush that is old, small, but it just gets the job done. And I'm telling you, if you are someone who never tries vintage gear, you're missing out if you have good technique. If you don't have good technique and you're new, you might have to learn to use these razors like this toggle I have here, which is pretty rare. But slim, fat boy, whatever the case may be. If you develop good technique and if you know how to use your equipment, you can make the most of it. Some equipment is better than others. Now, the modern production razors are fantastic, designed to be efficient, and a lot of them don't feel like they're super aggressive, but yet they're quite efficient. Like the Carve is a good example of that. It's efficient without feeling too efficient. Beautifully designed. But these older razors, like this toggle, it's just an incredible razor that stood the test of time. Is it my favorite razor of all time? No. But does it do a great job? Yes. And that's really what I'm getting at. Is I know some people they're only attracted to what's new and shiny, and that's perfectly understandable because quite frankly, I did the same thing when I first started. And I convinced myself that these vintage razors were crap because I was used to, above the tie and the razors of that day, Wolfman, pills. I bought them all, believe me, you've seen many of them. And I was convinced that it has to be modern and it has to be expensive for it to be good. Boy, was I wrong. It turns out I didn't know what the heck I was doing for quite some time. And so I basically poo-pooed vintage razors. And this is one of the things I'll do. I'll admit when I'm wrong. I was wrong, Now, you've seen me use them recently. And I love vintage razors. But when I was newer, I was like, they're not efficient enough for me, so on and so forth. And quite frankly, I was wrong. It was just a matter of learning to use them. And with proper technique, you can definitely make them work. And then you have a piece that has been around for a long time, sort of preserving history when you take good care of it and maybe pass it down to your son or grandson or what have you. And I think that's phenomenal, to maintain this hobby and to maintain tradition. Now, you know me. I'm not afraid to do non-traditional things while shaving in a traditional fashion. You could do that. I'm using a misting bottle. But at the same time, this vintage equipment, it's every bit as good as modern stuff. And in some cases, as in the case of this brush, I don't know if you can see that or not, but there is a great sheen on this. In some cases, as the case of this brush, having not dropped a single hair, being soft, it's fantastic. One thing I want to mention to people, because Oive reached out to me this morning, or yesterday actually, and he said, thanks so much for the tip on loading and lathering from the bowl. And as a result of doing that, he's getting less irritation, because what some people don't understand is these brushes with a lot of backbone, which this one is not, when you're scrubbing and making circles, especially down in your sensitive area and their hair there, it's kind of twisting them around. It leads to irritation in some people. Some people think it's the blade when it's actually the brush. A lot of people don't know that, and it's not often spoke about. So if you have particularly sensitive skin, the best thing you could do is make your lather in a bowl, bring it to your face and paint and minimize all that scrubbing. And honestly, in my view, just me, this is me, I don't have any need for a backbone in a brush. It's just not necessary. You can lather any soap on the market, including Martin DeCondre, Mitchell's Wolfat, with a soft brush. It is not necessary for me at all to have a lot of backbone. If you like the feel of that and you like the scrub, that is okay. There is no problem. If you like it, it's okay. but it's not essential because some people claim they can't lather a hard soap with a soft or floppy brush. That's nonsense. That's absolute rubbish. You can, if you know what you're doing. Again, technique trumps everything else, as I talked about earlier, as Mike Baker also said in his video. He's 100% right. And that's what I've learned over the years that I've been doing it is the number one thing is technique. Equipment comes after that. Knowing your face, knowing what it can handle, knowing when to stop, knowing what sort of strokes to take. Do you take long strokes, short strokes? You know, boy, this is super cold, this glacial. I mean, it brings it. And it smells to me almost identical to like a Hall's cherry cough drop or some, which to me is not a bad, it's not a bad scent. It might not be one you want to, you know, you may not want to use a glacial aftershave and smell like cough drop, or maybe you do. It is completely up to you. Like, I'm not one of these folks that poo-poos, you know. If you want to smell like dirt, like some of those fall scents or mildew, that is okay with me. I'm not going to use it because I don't want to smell like dirt and dead leaves and all these crazy fall scents. But it's entirely okay if you want to. You know, I don't poo-poo those things. I poo-poo them for myself, but I don't poo-poo anything for you. So you use whatever you love. By the way, the blade in here is the Nasset, which Oive sent me. Thank you, Oive. And man, this is a phenomenal razor. It really is. For some reason, and I don't know if it's completely in my head, but I'm really appreciating the shave. And it seems to me that I like the shave. This delivers a little more than the Fat Boy, and it may be exactly like the Fat Boy. It could be just up here. This is another thing I want to mention. A lot of things that you believe, or a small part, are probably preconceived notions. I'm telling you, I fell for it in the beginning. I'm sharing my experience with you. When I was new, everything that was new and shiny was the best. You know, because I watched so much content, I was like, oh, that's got to be the best razor. You know, everybody says it's the best. Figure it out for yourself. Use it. The only way to know is to use it. I love this menthol, and I love these traditional elements like alcohol, alum. I don't always use alum, but I love that I can, you know. So I see some shavers and they're like, this doesn't burn. The sort of newer guys seem to be averse to burn, and that's entirely okay. But I like it. Like, to me, it lets me know I'm doing something. Lets me know I'm alive. I like that feeling. This menthol right now makes me feel alive. It makes me feel invigorated. I don't want to fall asleep when I'm shaving, you know. I'm here to really enjoy the shave, and so I'll get a dose of menthol here. It just really, it's refreshing, it's invigorating. And then you use that wonderful aftershave and you get that scent, and then you get that little bit of burn. Let's be honest, guys. It doesn't burn that much. Even Cat o' Nine Tails, which is the most burning aftershave, doesn't burn that much. Come on, guys, toughen up a little bit. I mean, it doesn't burn that much. And I see some guys, they're putting it on. I'm like, woo. I can't eye roll enough. It's not that bad. I mean, come on. Now, that said, if you just absolutely don't like it, that's okay. But don't put it on and, you know, ooh, my man. I'm like, come on. Let's be a little tougher, a little toughness. It's not that bad. And I rather enjoy it. So I do find it funny. I do chuckle when I see people and they're really, they look like the Home Alone kid when he puts the aftershave. But the only difference is he's like 8 or 9 years old and they're like 38. And I'm like, I never saw my dad when he put on skin bracer going, ooh. He puts it on like a man. Or at least that's what we used to think of men, being somewhat tough and having, you know, you gotta have something, you know. You can't just, everything can't bother you and hurt you all the time. You have to be able to endure some things. That's just my feeling. That was a great shave. Phenomenal brush. Let me rinse and we'll get back and talk about this stuff a little bit. Just super enjoyable. Stand by. All right, we're back with our Lancaster towel. And here's an example of using a very modern thing with a traditional shave, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Very, very nice. Super cooling on the face because this is glacial. This doesn't play around. It just feels great. I mean, it's one of those things that I just appreciate. It makes me feel alive and invigorates me. It lets me know I'm here, you know. I don't know, that's just me. Let's talk about what we used. This brush right here, Ever Ready R40. This one was made in a time when they made things, they made them well and they made them to last. In stark contrast to many of the natural hair brushes that are produced today where they're shedding all over the place, and it's like, they had it right. They had it right with this one. And in many ways, personal opinion, they've gone backwards when it comes to actual knots. Because this one, for me, is terrific. And when I was buying expensive Badger knots, they were not terrific. Now, granted, maybe they're better now, but even the latest, I tried a few Badger brushes recently and they were just dropping hair, and it's absolute nonsense to have to put up with that, I think. We used the Gillette Toggle, really fantastic, rare vintage razor. I'm telling you, if you're not using a vintage now and then, you're missing out on tradition. You're missing out on terrific equipment that has stood the test of time. And I didn't show you how the toggle works, but basically the door's open by toggling it. Very, very cool. Delivered a fantastic shave. No cuts, creepers, weepers, nicks, irritation, bubbles, troubles. Fantastic. We used the Black Cherry, Glacial Black Cherry, fantastic. And we're not putting witch hazel on today because one thing I will note is if you use something like witch hazel before an alcohol-based aftershave, it will take some of this thing out. So we're just going to go without it today because I am not afraid of any alcohol burn, nor should anybody be afraid of it. Yes, you get a little bit of stinging, but it's not, let's be honest, it's not that bad. This is, by the way, is Black Cherry. Just smells like cherry. Some people don't like this kind of scent. That's okay. Don't be afraid of it. If you don't like it, I get it, but don't fear it. You know, slap that on and feel alive. You know, that's what it does for me, and I hope it will do that for you. Think about it a little bit. When you slap that on, you get that little bit of burning. You're like, you know, I'm alive. Yes, I'm tough. You know what I mean? Embrace it is what I'm trying to tell you. Anyway, this was a really fun shave. Don't sleep on this vintage equipment. This is good stuff. If you know how to use it, it works. It works. It's been around forever. It's lasted. It's worth trying, in my opinion. You may not like it, but for most people, this stuff will work just fine. I want to thank you, as always, for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it. Until next time, I want to remind you, it's your shave, do it your way, and God bless.